he's free. He ruled the world economy. He said the rich would never concede, but someday soon he'll be put to sleep. I'll see the light of the forest green and adaptations of the deep blue sea. And who knows who is up at last? They will also be put to rest. On a plunging fight, and we're sitting in the pilot's seat. In the midst of life, people on a dark horizon praying somebody will save their lives. I was born on planet Earth at a drastic time, full of plastic mirth. And every day I've seen increasing signs, and you would too if you'd open your eyes. You had a chance, you did not try, so now it's time to watch it die. Now it's time to watch it die.
Shall we start? Hi, everyone. Shall we start?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi,
Camilo.
everyone.
Nope, go ahead. Sorry.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for coming. It's an honor for me to be here. This is the Brazilian National Institute of Science and Technology for Digital Democracy 2020 International Conference. My name is Arthur. I'm a professor of political communication at the Pontifical Católica University in Rio, and I'm here to chair this event. For my invitation, I would like to thank very much everybody at the Institute, the team of organizers who are doing an incredible job to run this event during this difficult pandemic moment. Special thanks to Professor Wilson Gomes for the opportunity, the director of the Institute, a major reference for many of us here. So, as a part of this 2020 International Conference promoted by this Brazilian National Institute for Science and Technology for Digital Democracy, we are here to discuss elections and digital media. Well, at least since Jess Ventura's well-succeeded campaign for governor of Minnesota in 1998, the internet has been playing different roles in electoral campaigns and elections around the world. However, there's a general fear today coming from a series of political communication scholars that after 2016, with the Brexit referendum and Donald Trump's election, a special negative moment began. To discuss this and other matters concerning digital communication technologies and elections, we honored to have here with us Professor Jennifer Stromer-Galley. Jennifer Stromer-Galley is professor in the School of Information Studies at the Syracuse University, Senior Associate Dean for Academic and Faculty Affairs, and former director for the Center for Computational and Data Science. She's an affiliated faculty member with the Department of Communication and Rhetorical Studies and with the Department of Political Science. Professor Stromer-Galley has been a very important world reference in the field of digital media and elections, and we are very honored to have her here today. Also with us, I'm proud to present my friend and colleague, Professor Camilo Aggio. Camilo Aggio is Associate Professor at the Federal University of Minas Gerais. His actual research interest lies in democracy, digital media, and elections. Each of our speakers will have until 30 minutes to present their ideas, and then we open for questions. Please submit your questions through the chat. We have decided to start with Camilo Aggio. Please, Professor Aggio, It's you.
So hi everybody, good evening, and I'd like to thank first to the INCT.DD for the invitation to this challenging mission, and of course I'd like to. It's a pleasure to be here once again, working with Arthur Ituassu. That's how we call his last name in Salvador to avoid some cultural and social implications. He knows what I mean. So it's a pleasure to be here with you, Arthur. And I will always celebrate every single opportunity to listen to Professor Jennifer Stromer-Galley and to learn with her. And it's a pleasure. And Jennifer, I'm sorry, can I call you Jenny? It's a very important person in my intellectual and academic life, for sure. And not only for me, we have a lot of gratitude with your work. And so we have a very broad theme here on this panel. And the first effort, I guess, I have to take was to narrow a little bit and choose one road in a lot of roads that is this very broad scientific field or research field. So I'm going to talk about 2018 Brazilian presidential election, and that's the title of my presentation. Digital Media and Elections, Lessons from 2018 Brazilian presidential election. And despite my deep contempt of this Brazilian citizen that has become our president, that happened to be our president now, I guess we all should assume that Jair Bolsonaro campaign has a lot of lessons that we should pay attention to, and that's what I'm gonna talk about here. So I know when it comes to Donald Trump, the U.S., Jair Bolsonaro, or Erdogan, or Orban, all those political leaders. And when it comes to discuss communication and those political leaders and this election contest situations, we have to discuss ethics. We can put it aside on a long term. But I'm going to propose here we should put ethics aside for 30 minutes here or 1 hour and a half to comprehend his Jair Bolsonaro's successful digital campaigning tactics. And that's what I'm going to talk about here. And I think this phenomena is not only about how his campaign used the so-called fake news and disinformation methods to spread lies and attack his opponents. Now, I argue that Jair Bolsonaro and his staff, and more than that, spontaneous activism that converged to empower his candidacy, raised the concept of permanent campaign to a new level, and in my opinion, moved the tectonic plates of Brazilian presidential election history. So I'm gonna argue and show some arguments here to support that. First of all, Jair Bolsonaro, what happened with Jair Bolsonaro in 2018 Brazilian election wasn't usual. So here's some topics to understand that. He had a very small budget. Now, even considering the alleged frauds, the distance between his budget, his campaign budget, comparing to his opponents was huge. Mm-hmm. So even with the alleged frauds, as demonstrated by the political scientist Jairo Nicolau, he was far away and in a disadvantage situation considering his opponents. So he had a very small budget. And second thing, he was not even in a real political party. So the PSL, in English, PSL, it was a very tiny party. And I was looking for an English expression to translate what we call puxadinho in Portuguese, and I didn't found it. But I mean, like, was a very tiny political party that you can't even consider that as a political party if we adopt a strong concept of what is a political party. So he was in a very tiny, irrelevant, nationally irrelevant political party. And he had no party coalition. So not even a structure to put him in some sort of advantage in different regions in Brazil. He was actually irrelevant, nationally speaking. So considering communication, I think that's the fourth and last aspect that is more important. And he had only few seconds for TV and radio propaganda, according, of course, to the official Brazilian system for the electoral TV and radio propaganda. He had only 8 seconds in the first round and almost 50 million votes. So that's huge. It's very challenging. So I think we were facing an unprecedented reality. So almost all political and communication variables that used to define competitive candidates and winners in Brazilian presidential contests have gone down the toilet in the 2018 presidential election results. And unfortunately, part of our democracy as well, I guess. So here's the question. We were facing exceptionality or a new era? I tend to choose the second option here, okay? So, of course, to avoid some technological determinism, I have to talk about some political contextualization here. So Bolsonaro couldn't happen. He couldn't be elected president without a long process with many episodes that took part in Brazil, and from especially 2013 and 2016. We can number here like the Operation Car Wash and all the political crisis created by the performance of this operation. Okay, and of course, related to that, we had a very huge and strong political activism in the judicial branch and DA offices, especially against the party on the government by them. So the second aspect on this subject of political contextualization to understand Jair Bolsonaro is the Dilma Rousseff's impeachment. And it was not an episodical thing. And we have to look to Dilma Rousseff impeachment as a long process with many episodes, with a lot of crises that created a lot of opportunities to the right-wing groups to get to know, including the extremist Jair Bolsonaro, the right-wing extremist Jair Bolsonaro. And third, we have economic crisis. So that created a kind of a situation that made all those transformations and created that a lot of opportunities for this new kind of political moment. And finally, I think that the most important here about political contextualization is cultural backlash. So to use cultural backlash is the title of the last book published by Pippa Norris, right? And she's trying to explain what variables, what factors made Brexit and Donald Trump election possible, right? And she finds out that cultural backlash maybe is the most strong variable here to explain this. And I think that this is the case when it comes to Jair Bolsonaro 2008 Brazilian election. So I think it's the new rise of Brazilian conservatives, as well as the old and traditional Brazilian discrimination against political minorities. So we can say xenophobia, racism, sexism, misogyny, demophobia, and especially homophobia. So I am listening to this amazing Brazilian podcast called Retrato Narrado by the amazing journalist Carol Pires. And she brought some information very in the last episode, the fourth episode, about how communication, social media was used by Jair Bolsonaro, but media in general. And she brings that thing. The first peak of Google's search engine for Jair Bolsonaro happened just after the most popular TV station aired the first gay kiss in soap operas. So the first gay kiss, that's when people just, started using hugely Google to know what Jair Bolsonaro said. And I remember a situation that the liberal press and the liberal citizens in Brazil were just celebrating the first gay kiss in that TV station. We were like sharing videos and pretty happy about it. But something underneath that liberal surface was happening. And I think people were pretty unsatisfied about it. And especially when it comes to this kind of homophobia, this traditional Brazilian homophobia that is, okay, I have nothing against homosexuals, the gay communities, but I don't want my kids to watch that. I don't want those people kissing in front of me, you know? So, and I think that this is a great information. So because I do argue forever that we can understand Jair Bolsonaro in this aspect, in this political contest, without considering that thing, the cultural backlash. So moving forward, I think, but even with this political contextualization, all those situations, but none of this would be sufficient, because I think Bolsonaro hardly could be elected president without how his staff and himself used digital media and how digital media users embraced him. I think it's not only what Bolsonaro and his staff have made with social media, but what many digital media users have made to support him for a long period of time. So I'm talking about a diverse set of profiles, pages, and groups. So people against affirmative actions, against gun control, against the dictatorship of the homosexuals in Brazil, for example. So they're not looking for rights; they're looking for privileges, and that's it. So anti-communism, anti-socialism, anti-gun control, anti-feminism, and so on. So communication here plays a very important part to we comprehend this phenomenon. So, and most important, with the decentralization of public and social communication, the official election calendar that regulates campaigning in Brazil became a fiction, totally. So here's the thing: I don't know if it is new, but maybe there are some new aspects here. But we can talk about the new permanent campaign, and I think it's not only about spending money on campaign-like communication and actives during mandates, as the original concept states. And it's more than blurring the lines between campaigning and governing, like said Blumenthal in 1980. I think it's about to keep unstoppable campaign-like communication on social media despite the status of the citizens seeking mandates. Maybe more than an active online presence, as Larson put it. So I think Jair Bolsonaro showed that you can pave your way to the presidency running a campaign long before the limits of the election calendar and not having any dependency on traditional media. In 2018, traditional political parties and well-known presidential candidates were waiting for 45 days of official campaign to start campaigning, basically waiting for the beginning of political propaganda on TV and radio in media events such as presidential debates. So while they were waiting for the past to start, Bolsonaro was happening in the present tense of digital media. Most important, years against 45 days for the other candidates to campaign. And I think we have a paradigmatic example on that. Just after Dilma Rousseff got reelected, she promised to her followers on Twitter that she would use Twitter every day to be connected with the Brazilian citizens. She never did that. She never did that, actually. And she started to use, she started to reuse, actually, to reactivate her Twitter account when we had the street demonstrations, and we can say some riots in Brazil, especially in 2013. And we do know that she finally listened to some experts that said to her that, okay, Dilma, here's the thing. An important part of the political life, Brazilian political life, was happening in the digital media. We have a new kind of word here, so you can't ignore. And the first thing that Dilma did to try to control the decrease of her popularity was to reactivate and use digital media. But here's the problem, and that's the irony. So the right-wing groups and the extremists were using that, including with the help of some experts, right-wing experts on technology, like Steve Bannon and Professor Jennifer Stromer-Galley knows what I'm saying. That those guys are like traveling the whole world and searching for opportunities to get I don't know, create a new hegemony, you know. So that wasn't different here. So I don't know, how much time do I have, Arthur? I think
you may have 5-10 minutes.
Okay, I'm about to finish. So here's my core argument here, and the permanent campaign is fundamental. You know, it's we gotta know, especially when it comes to the Brazilian election system, that being on social media and trying to create a strong candidacy demands being there not just for this short period of time of official campaigning, but for a long period. I mean, like, and this turns social media more relevant on this matter. So just to finish, we can talk about permanent campaigning and some tools used by Jair Bolsonaro, like WhatsApp. So in 2018, around 120 million Brazilian citizens were using it in 2018, more than half of the population. It gave Bolsonaro the possibility to reach an unreachable amount of voters if 2018 were in the centralized mass communication era. So public visibility, channels to access, diversity of regional, local, and demographic groups, and I think opportunities to show the compatibility between his moral agenda and the moral values of the voters. That's what happened in 2018, I guess. So on WhatsApp, those groups, they adopt a kind of Landleo logic. I don't know if that makes sense, but they dump a lot of materials, contents, YouTube videos, WhatsApp videos, links to right-wing sites and stuff like that on a daily basis, just to make people to have contents, information, to spread it through others' channels. And that's what Professor Jennifer Stromer-Galley puts on his book as an argument. Now, we gotta pay attention to the two-step flow model of communication, right? And of course, we got to consider the concept of hybrid media system, Andrew Chadwick's hybrid media system, to fully comprehend this. And once again, Stromer-Galley is here as a reference, I told you. And we gotta consider how Jair Bolsonaro used this advantage called the control interactiveness. Right? I remember, I promised Arthur, I'm going to finish here now. So I remember when Jair Bolsonaro was in a lot of press conferences and talking about his candidacy, and journalists used to ask him, so where's your staff? Where's your campaign committee? You don't have anything of that. And he used to show his cell phone screen with a lot of WhatsApp groups popping up, you know? And journalists used to say, what an amateur. He has no chance to win that. And they started laughing. Who's laughing now? That's it.
Great end. Great final. Professor Aggio, thank you very much for such a bright talk. I would highlight at least 5 very important issues that you have mentioned. The relationship that we have to discuss between permanent campaign, digital media, and populism. 2, the tensions between exceptionality and new era in digital political campaigns. 3, the election of Jair Bolsonaro as a process. It seems to me that it does not matter here what is the independent variable. We are in fact talking about a process in a mailing political communication process. The huge presence of Jair Bolsonaro in digital media, especially on Facebook, that was complemented by the WhatsApp strategy that mixes professional and voluntary work. And finally, the election of populists heavily using digital media as a global phenomenon, which points, in my view, to the need for more comparative studies. We go now to, I'm very happy to announce, we go now to Professor Jennifer Stromer-Galley. Thank you again for being here with us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you very much for having me. Boa noite. Thank you. I am grateful that you're willing to let me talk in English and not Portuguese, because that's about all I got. I'm sorry that I cannot be with you in Brazil. I want to thank Arthur, and I see that Wilson Gomez is in the chat. And so I visited Brazil in 2015, I think, and I had the opportunity to spend some time with Camilo and with Wilson and the Institute, which is a very important institution in academia in Brazil, helping to advance research on the internet and digital democracy. And so I'm glad to be back with you today, this evening, to talk about elections in the United States. I want to point out, as Camilo noted, Bolsonaro is running a continual campaign. Donald Trump, when he won election in 2016, as soon as he was inaugurated as president in January 20th of 2017, he immediately filed to run for president again. And for basically the past 3.5 years of his presidency, he has continued to campaign for this reelection that we're now living in the United States. So I have some slides to show you. I'm going to share my screen, and I hope this all works smoothly. We'll see what happens. Okay, yeah, you see the slides? Perfect. Okay, so I am going to talk with you about the role of social media, especially Facebook advertising, in the U.S. presidential election this election season. I'm going to start by describing a little bit about the project, the research project that we're undertaking here at Syracuse University to study social media in the political campaign. We call the project Illuminating 2020. I'll give you a bit of background about the project and what we're trying to accomplish. Then I'll explain to you a bit why it is that political campaigns in the United States are using, especially Facebook, to run advertisements. And then I'll share a little bit about analyses we have done so far. And then, of course, I'm happy to answer questions. So the project, I'm the principal investigator of this project that we call Illuminating 2020. And if you want to, you can follow along. That is, you are welcome to go to illuminating.ischool.syr.edu to look at this website that I'm showing you right now and to play with our data. We try to make everything as available and accessible as possible. So this project, as you see, started in 2016. We looked at social media posts on Facebook and Twitter. And in 2020, we have pivoted to look at advertisements. Part of the reason we're looking at ads this election cycle is because of the results of the election in 2016. It was a surprise to many people that Donald Trump won the election. And after the election, many researchers and journalists conducted post hoc analysis to try to explain the surprise of his election. One of the explanations that many came to was that Donald Trump, in his campaign in 2016, heavily used Facebook advertisements to target voters and mobilize them, especially Republican voters who are otherwise not being communicated with, to engage in the election and turn out to vote on election day. You might remember that Donald Trump lost by 3 million votes, but he won the Electoral College, which is a funny institution in the United States that I'm happy to describe at a later point. But the Electoral College game is one of finding voters in parts of the country and really mobilize them. And he seemed to use Facebook ads to do so. The challenge is that in 2016, Facebook did not make it possible for researchers or journalists to see the advertisements that were run on the platform. In 2018, Facebook made an API available, an application programming interface for researchers and journalists to access the databases of the advertisements that were running from 2018 to today. And so I decided that we really needed to try to build a website that journalists and the public could use for the 2020 election to try to see and understand what the campaigns were saying and doing in their advertisements and who they were targeting. This is a very complicated slide, but basically the project collects the ads that are on Facebook servers, and then we use supervised machine learning. We basically build algorithms to categorize the messages in the advertisements on a set of features, which I'll talk about more in a minute, and then those feed into the website. So when I show you later some of the results that we have been finding in the data, that's coming from the algorithms that we have built. It also comes from data from Facebook, and I'll describe both. So why are presidential campaigns, and it's not just presidential campaigns, we have many different political actors and political parties and interest groups and organizations that are running ads on social media. So they are everywhere right now, from YouTube to Facebook to Google and websites. This is a screenshot of my Facebook wall. About 3 weeks ago, Donald Trump, the Donald Trump campaign, targeted me for this Amy Coney Barrett advertisement. So why? Campaigns are spending a lot of money on Facebook advertising right now. And I'll be careful here and say that when I say Facebook, we are saying Facebook and Instagram. Facebook owns Instagram, so I use Facebook as a shortcut, but it's really, we're looking at both platforms in the analysis. But so far, just since June of this year, the Donald Trump and Joe Biden campaigns have spent $130 million so far on advertising on the platform. That's a lot of money. But it is important to put it into context. That amount is only about 30% of the total advertising budget that the campaigns are spending on their messaging out. So some of that's because Facebook is much less expensive than television advertisements. So roughly speaking, on Facebook, it's about $1 to run an advertisement to roughly $100 to run an advertisement on television. So that explains why it's a relatively small portion of the total advertising revenue that the campaigns are spending. But it's worth noting that on Facebook, the campaigns have produced and disseminated over 200,000 different ads on Facebook. So while the Facebook advertisement is a bit less in terms of the money that they're spending, they are running a lot of ads on Facebook. So now I want to talk a little bit about the power of Facebook advertising for campaigns, why they spend this money and run all of these ads on a platform like Facebook. So this is my Facebook wall. And again, as I mentioned, I was targeted with a Donald Trump Facebook ad. I should mention that I work very hard to look like a Republican to the Republican Party and to look like a Democrat to the Democratic Party, so that I can try as a researcher to get as much of a picture of what the campaigns are trying to do as possible. So that's part of the reason why I got served this Donald Trump ad. When Donald Trump is deciding who to target in advertisements, they are working with the algorithms of Facebook to try to predict who should be a target of an advertisement by the Trump campaign. So in my example here, Donald Trump is trying to find potential voters who are interested in politics, who maybe are Republican, who are interested in women's issues, and perhaps interested in gun rights. And Facebook helps Donald Trump find those sorts of voters or supporters by classifying me based on my behaviors on the platform. So my personal profile on Facebook provides information about my profession, about my interests and hobbies. If I like organizations or music groups or sports teams, if I talk about or attend events by these popular cultural events, Facebook is categorizing and classifying that also to help predict my interests. And of course, they very much want my hobbies. In the United States, if I were to say that I go fishing or I like to hunt, then that would increase the probability that I align with the Republican Party. As well, my friend network, we know the theories of social networks and the homogeneity of our networks. If I am a Republican, I am likely to have a social network that's also likely Republican. And Facebook is categorizing and tracking that as well. And of course, my posts, the things that I write on my Facebook wall, all further reinforce and help the platform to make predictions about whether I should be a good target of a Trump ad. So for Facebook, in terms of helping Donald Trump find people like me, I check certain boxes. Am I interested in politics? Yes. Do I look like a Republican? And as I said, I do try to look like a Republican on the platform. So yeah, maybe I am. I also try to look like a Democrat, so it makes it harder for them to predict my partisanship. I am interested in women's issues based on my likes and my posts, and I'm interested in gun rights. And so all of those things would suggest to the Donald Trump campaign that perhaps I am somebody that should be a target of an advertisement by the Trump campaign. I should be clear that Facebook does not share my information with the Trump campaign. Instead, the Trump campaign goes to Facebook and says, we want to find people who are likely Republican, interested in gun rights, interested in women's rights, and that you think are Republicans. And since I check those boxes, I get served that ad. So I want to talk a little bit more about the power of Facebook advertising and why it is the campaigns see it as such a beneficial channel for advertising. So television, which again is still taking the bulk of the money that the campaigns are spending on their advertisements, it is a very inefficient advertising medium. Television blankets a wide area. So a candidate can't buy an advertisement for Republicans to run on television. They buy ads that run on television, and then it blankets a location. So Syracuse, for example, where I live, has 65% of the public is, roughly speaking, is aligned with the Democratic Party. So if the Trump campaign says they're going to run or want to run ads in Syracuse, if they run that television ad, it's mostly hitting Democrats. And so it's inefficient. Whereas Facebook, there are Republicans in Syracuse. And so Facebook allows the Republican Party to send advertisements to those Republicans in that area. Brad Parscale, who was Donald Trump's digital director in 2016, and then his campaign director until June this year, was quoted in a news story talking about Facebook as allowing the Trump campaign to find needles in a haystack, to find those pockets of isolated Republicans in otherwise Democratic areas, to mobilize them and get them to vote on election day, leading to the speculation that that's what they did to try to mobilize voters in electoral college states, battleground states, that would help Trump to win. So that explains then why it is that I might be somebody who gets served an ad like this, because I live in a predominantly Democratic area, but I look like a Republican. So, hence, I get this ad. All right, so now I want to talk with you a little bit about what we are seeing in the patterns on Facebook advertisements by Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And again, you're welcome to take a look at the website yourself and play with the data. And I'll show you here. This is a screenshot. Rather than risk things live, because sometimes things don't work, I made screenshots of some of the patterns results. So if you dig into the website, you will see that you can do a number of things on the site. And again, our focus here is to help journalists to understand and tell stories and hopefully increase transparency and hold the political candidates accountable in their advertising by making it more visible to journalists to do so. And so there are a number of things that we have made available. So the journalists can look at the candidate pages. We include not only the official pages by the two campaigns, they also run a number of additional pages like Wisconsin for Biden or Women for Trump Facebook pages, and then run advertisements that are associated with those pages. We have those as well. When we collect the ads from the Facebook databases, we get metadata from those ads. So we get the ad content and we get the impression information and the amount of money that was spent on the advertisement. We also get target data, the gender target of the ad, the age targets of the ad, as well as the state that the ad was run in, or the set of states that the advertisement was run in. And then we have added our own categorizations of the ads in terms of message type, message topic, and message tone. And I'll talk more about those in a minute. So those are our classifications of the advertisements based on our algorithms that we have built. So let me give you some observations. So far, in terms of the type of message that the campaigns run, they are almost always asking targets of the ads to do something. That is a call to action, and I'll give you an example in a minute. You'll see that there are some differences in what Joe Biden and Donald Trump are doing. Joe Biden is on the left and Donald Trump is on the right, and this is proportional spending. So I should pause and note that Donald Trump was spending substantially more money on Facebook ads in June, July, and August. In September, Biden began to spend more money on Facebook ads. And so this is a proportional representations rather than a raw dollar amount, which makes it harder to make comparisons between the two candidates. So you can see here then that Joe Biden is talking about his persona more than Donald Trump is. In other words, Biden tends to talk about his character, his values, his ability to lead the nation. He also is attacking more than Donald Trump in his advertisements, but he's also, interestingly, talking less on the issues in his advertisements. And when you look at the ads and see how it is that Biden is running compared to Trump, basically Joe Biden is running as not Trump. So rather than talking much about the issues, he's instead emphasizing his good character and attacking Trump's bad character, as well as, again, trying to call the supporters or the targets of the advertisements to get involved with this campaign. I should mention all of this data, again, comes from the Illuminating Project, and the date range for this analysis is June 1st to October 11th. I did a quick check before the talk to see if the proportional spending had changed substantially in the last 2 weeks, and it's not substantially different. So I decided not to update the slides at the last minute. So here's an example of a call to action ad. This is a Joe Biden advertisement, and you can see at the beginning he starts by saying, in just a moment, I'm going to ask you to make a contribution. And that is one of the more common calls to action in these advertisements. And you'll note that there is a donate button here, and pretty much every advertisement has some link that takes you back to a website, whether it's a fundraising money taking website or it's the campaign website. And through this call to action, the campaign is now trying to better understand who the potential supporters are, to get data about them, to then further reinforce their targeting profiles on Facebook. Here's an example of a persona ad. This is a Donald Trump advertisement, and you can see at the top he says, President Trump is a genuine American patriot. So that is characterizing him and his personality as that of a patriot. And so we consider that to be a persona or a description of his character. And then I'll give you an example of an attack ad. And again, because Joe Biden does attack a little bit more, I've given you an example of an attack ad from him. So Biden writes in this advertisement, and of course I'm saying Biden, but I really mean the campaign, but you know what I mean. As Trump fans the flames of white supremacy and hatred in our country, every last one of us shares a responsibility to stand by and pursue justice with every ounce of our being. That's why we need 1 million Americans to speak out before 11:59 p.m. tonight, but we're still missing your response. Sign your name now to condemn Donald Trump. So he is attacking Trump. He is fanning the flames of white supremacy. We are to sign our name to condemn Donald Trump. And of course, signing our name gives the campaign some data about the advertisement, who is mobilized by this advertisement, and also getting data then to help them reinforce their modeling. Now I want to talk about tone. And I need to be careful here about what I mean by tone. So I have been fortunate to work with Patricia Rossini, who some of you might know. She is currently at the University of Liverpool. She worked with me here at Syracuse University. And before that, she was at the Federal University of Minas Gerais. And she has been a major contributor of the research we've been doing on civility in the advertising. And so when I talk about tone here, I am talking about the concept of civility that Patricia Rossini has advanced in her research. For us, civility is about violating the norms of deliberation and with basically character assassinations or very nasty or vile attacks on the opposition that really break the norms of what we expect politicians to say about their opponents. And in our analysis, again on the left, Joe Biden, the purplish color is civil advertisements, and the blue color is uncivil. Biden is on the left and Trump is on the right. And perhaps it's not a surprise if you've been following along with Donald Trump's rhetoric, but Donald Trump does run significantly more advertisements that are uncivil in their tone than Joe Biden is. And again, I think Biden is trying to run as not Trump. And so producing rhetoric in his advertisements that doesn't attack in the same sort of ways is the signature of Joe Biden. So here's an example of a Donald Trump advertisement. I have personally been targeted with this ad. I've seen it on my Facebook wall. So Trump says in this ad, Democrats have lost their minds, of course in all caps. Joe Biden's supporters are pushing to defund the police and violent crime has exploded. We can't stand by while these anarchists destroy our country. Learn more about why Sleepy Joe is dangerous for America. And so there's a set of clues here in this message that are indicative of uncivil discourse. Democrats have lost their minds. This is not a this is a very negative portrayal of Democrats. As well, the supporters of Biden's are described as being anarchists who will destroy the country and are the cause of violent crime. And the last thing is Donald Trump has a tendency to attack his opponents by giving them negative labels like Sleepy Joe or Crooked Hillary. And then we do also categorize the advertisements in terms of the policy topics that are present in the advertisements. And what we find is that Trump and Biden have distinctly different policy emphasis in their advertisements. So again, Joe Biden is on the left and Donald Trump is on the right. And this is still proportional spending in the advertisements on these different topics. I'll highlight just a couple of things in the interest of time. You'll note that Joe Biden is talking more on social and cultural issues. These are topics like abortion or birth control and contraception. It also includes questions or debate about gay marriage, gay rights, transgender rights. It also would include things like right now in the United States, there's a lot of discussion about legalization, or there had been until recently, legalization of marijuana and other drugs would all go under social and cultural issues. You'll note too that he also emphasizes the economy. His advertisements tend to highlight the negative economy, how hard our economy has fallen in the last 9 months. He also emphasizes foreign policy, and you'll see in his ads that he also does talk about COVID and COVID-19 in his advertisements. Meanwhile, Donald Trump tends to emphasize safety. So he has been running a large number of advertisements that emphasize law and order in his discourse. He does also talk about the economy. However, for him, he's emphasizing the strength of the economy before COVID-19. You'll note he doesn't advertise much on COVID. The largest category here of governance is a is a funny category. We almost didn't include it this time around because generally campaigns don't talk much about the structures and the nature of government, which is what governance is. But because Donald Trump has been questioning the legitimacy of certain types of voting right now, especially mail-in ballots and especially mail-in ballots, and also the debate about whether or not Amy Coney Barrett should be appointed to the Supreme Court, which happened yesterday, when Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed, those are governance discussions. And so it just just happened that we included this category this summer. Actually, I decided maybe we should include it, and it turns out that was a good choice. We would have missed that completely otherwise. Just a few more things and I'll wrap up. Now I want to share with you some of the data we get from Facebook in terms of metadata about who is targeted in the advertisements. What we find is that the targets on gender reflect the party differences between the Democrats and the Republicans. So Biden is more likely to target women in his advertisements than Donald Trump is. So again, Biden is on the left and Trump is on the right, and the purple color is women, the whitish color is men. And you can see that Biden is spending more advertising dollars on that's weird, is spending more dollars on women than Donald Trump is. This reflects the Democratic Party. In the United States, women are more likely to identify or even sort of affiliate loosely with or are registered with the Democratic Party. And so this speaks to the party structure in the United States and the demographics. And we see something similar when we look at age. So Trump is targeting older voters at a much higher rate than Biden is. Biden is targeting 25 to 34-year-olds and 35 to 44-year-olds much more so than Donald Trump is. This also is a reflection of the parties. The Democratic Party tends to draw in younger voters. The Republican Party tends to draw in older voters. It is interesting to me, though, to note that, remember, this is Facebook and Instagram, and the fact that both campaigns are spending substantially on the 65 and older vote on Facebook, which is not roughly only about 50% of people who are 65 and older have a Facebook account. So it's not quite where that demographic lives, but it speaks to the power of Facebook and the power of advertising that the campaigns are interested to spend so much money on that demographic, even though they're not as present on the platform. So I need to pause at this juncture and spend a little bit of time thanking my gigantic team. I could not do this project without them. Again, I want to highlight Jeff Hemsley and Patricia Rossini and Brian McKernan, who help with the day-to-day work from algorithm building to data visualization. Anya Korsunska and Sarah Bolden are two doctoral students who designed the website. So if you like the design, I have them to thank. And then I have a set of master students who help with the machine learning work and the algorithm building that we do. On the undergraduate side, I have an amazing team of undergraduates who help with the day-to-day work, from developing the samples that we use to do the machine learning work to currently helping us write articles and analyze data to help push it out to journalists. So hopefully we can help them increase transparency in the advertisements in the 2020 election. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and turn the floor back over to you, Arthur.
Thank you very much, Professor Stromer-Galley. Thank you very much for such a brilliant presentation. There are 6 points here I would like quickly to highlight. First, thank you for sharing the Illuminating Project 2020. Very nice, very interesting project. I have already visited the website and signed the newsletter. Didn't know about it. To the importance of digital ads, especially Facebook ads, to political communication nowadays as an element of political communication, also as a research and monitoring object. In the end, it seems that ads can also be regarded as representations of the platform it works for. Yeah. Third, the trend of micro-targeting, the creation of many publics through digital media, the importance of this. Four, the importance of dealing with data to understand electoral campaign nowadays. The importance also of doing data science for good. This is, I think, is very, very nice, very important of this project. Five, the relevance of tone, of civility. We had Stephen Coleman yesterday talking about the problem of anger in digital media. So this is very nice to hear about, so we can deal with both perspectives.
That's great.
And finally, the matter of gender. It's interesting that for the first time in the Brazilian presidential election, we had significant different amounts of male and female votes to the candidates. It was the first time, with significant more males voting for Bolsonaro.
Yeah.
So now we are open for questions. Questions to Professor Aggio from Professor Wilson Gomes. I would like, if possible, to have a comment from you in the following quote from Jairo Nicolau. And it is these ordinary people who are not such fascists that we must understand. As long as we fight the extreme fascist right and think that this is the best way to fight Bolsonarism, we will not understand Brazil. Professor Gomes wants...
I thought, thank you. I'm so sorry.
No,
can I answer?
Go ahead.
So, thank you, Professor Gomes, for the question. And I was actually, I thought you would ask if I am a petista, PT supporter. So I'm disappointed, really. And I think that convert the question of the reasons why people voted for Bolsonaro into a search for Brazilian fascist is a trap, an empty question, I guess. I mean, like, we can, a lot of people argue that people that supported the Italian fascism, the Nazism, weren't actually fascists. So that's not my point. I do not discuss that. And I think that we gotta pay attention to the cultural backlash, moral panic of many people that saw in Jair Bolsonaro like a way, like an option to reorganize that world that they used to know. And I think that the example that I gave in my presentation concerning the podcast, and I mean the gay kids on the soap opera, is it's one of a lot of examples behind it. And I think that there are moral panics, and I think people saw Jair Bolsonaro saying a lot of things about the rights of women and like homosexuality as a normal thing. It's not a normal thing. They are freaks. He said that. And I mean, like, I wrote that a lot, and I say that a lot. So I spend a lot of time listening to people around me saying things that Jair Bolsonaro said along his permanent campaigning. And I think that Jair Bolsonaro was very successful in transform this electoral contest, this political contest, into a moral contest. And I think that's a variable that we cannot ignore.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Aggio. If I may, I would like to pose a question myself to Professor Stromer-Galley. In the second edition of your book, Presidential Campaigns, which was very nice to read, actually, you have highlighted, correct me if I'm wrong, the efficiency of data-driven campaign. Also, we have seen this in your project, creating massive database of voter information for more effective micro-targeting through digital media, something that was especially particular to Trump's campaign use of Facebook in 2016. This seems to be a very effective political communication practice, and I'm thinking a lot about it today, together with something my research group have heard from an important Brazilian campaign strategist, as a part of a field research we are doing about Bolsonaro's campaign here in Brazil in 2018. This interview told us that a president forged in this system of micro-targeting communication cannot govern for all the people, that this idea of governing for all may be a modern idea in danger. So my question is, Do you believe micro-targeting political communication, the creation of many specific publics through digital communication may generate problems to democratic governance? If so, what kind of problems?
Wow, that is a fantastic question. Thank you for asking that. And an important one, because in the mass media era of the United States, and again, I'll focus on the US context since that's my expertise, but from, the 1950s until the 1980s, we had mass broadcasting and a homogenization of information and a kind of a moderation of extreme partisanship in that time. Some of the research that looks at that period suggests that while Americans did not know that much about politics, Americans between the 1950s and 1990s had some exposure to politics because at 6 p.m., if you turned on the television, there were 3 stations, and at 6 p.m., the only thing airing on those 3 stations was news. And so the public got a little bit of a taste of news, and because there was nothing to opt out of, there was exposure. And so even those who are not that interested in politics still learned a little bit about politics, and they voted. And so because they had a little bit of knowledge and engagement through that exposure, so from the kind of extreme partisans to the moderate voter, they all turned out to vote on election day, or were likely to vote on election day. As you know, the United States turnout rate is always kind of sad. But so then cable television comes along, first CNN and then eventually Fox News, and cable more broadly. And when cable television came along, then people who didn't have any interest in politics at 6 p.m. when they turned on the television, they could watch Bob's Burgers or Simpsons, right? They didn't have to watch the news. Those of us weird people who love the news could turn on to CNN and watch news and get even more knowledge. And there's some suggestion that those who are uninterested or less interested in politics basically dropped out. They stopped voting, they stopped paying attention because they didn't have to, and they weren't exposed. So that broadcast era then shifts to this network era, and with advertising, the opportunities by political campaigns to activate small micro publics and engage them in politics and then campaign and communicate and support them, I think is a risk, because again, those who are not that interested in politics, who right now things are unprecedented. The economy is terrible. We are living in a global pandemic. So turnout is going to be high this election because many people are unhappy with the state of things. But back in 2016, I do think that the campaigns, especially the Trump campaign, could activate and target those people that they thought would be supporters for them, and then run policies in office that spoke to them and not governed to the rest of the public. And so I think there potentially is a risk of further polarization and governing to the margins, to those extremes, leaving the rest of the public out. And that's very dangerous and very harmful for our democracy. It's only when you have events like this where so many people vote that you get a kind of an amelioration of that. But what happens in 4 years again? I don't know. It's a really important question, Arthur. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your answer too. João, do we have more questions? Nardine Alman, a question for Professor Stromer-Galley. Very interesting, insightful project, Jennifer. Putting the elections aside, what kind of uncivil discourse tone would be acceptable?
Right. That's a really good question. So I want to be clear here that we are not passing judgment on what is acceptable or unacceptable discourse in this research. What I will say, however, is that when you live in a two-party system like the United States, complex policy cannot be done except when there's compromise. But if one side or both sides are demonizing, attacking, and dehumanizing the other side, then it becomes very hard for compromise and deliberation to happen between the parties. And I think you're seeing that right now. We are so polarized. And I'll be frank, I think Donald Trump's rhetoric has created a very hostile climate in which the Democrats do not want to negotiate or really involve themselves in any policies that the Republican Party wants to advance because Donald Trump demonizes the Democrats. You can't have good feeling and compromise when everybody is basically hating each other. And so we have stalemate right now. And that's the concern, is that, again, before Trump, and even, you know, in the mass media era of campaigning, there was this sort of expectation that a politician, a president, would behave with some norms of respect for the opponents, even when they disagreed. So, for example, it used to be absolutely taboo that you would call an opponent a liar. You never called an opponent a liar because, again, that disparages your opponent and now makes it hard to have any kind of compromise. Well, Donald Trump does that and more to his opponents. And so it makes for a very polarizing, unproductive political policy environment. That's the concern. So, yeah, I don't know if that quite answers the question, but that's the motives behind the civility category.
Thank you very much. Do we have, yes, Cristiane Brum? Thank you, Professors Stromer-Galley and Aggio. Do you think the resentment is something important to explain the last elections in Brazil and US?
Camilo, do you want to start?
I think I said already about it. Yes, I do think that that's a part of the, a major part, I think, that of the explanation for the Jair Bolsonaro successful campaigning. And not only that, but how he's dealing tragically with a lot of issues here in Brazil and sustaining his popularity. Even dealing in a worse fashion comparing to Donald Trump when it comes to the pandemic. And I think he has like at least 30% of the electorate of his support comes from how he can handle this moral agenda. This is important here, and I think it explains certainly his election.
Yeah, I think there is a fair amount of disillusionment and frustration in the United States, and Trump has capitalized on that in his run in 2016. The economy, it's really important to remember, and I think this is true for Brazil, but in the United States, the economy has not rebounded really since 2008. So when the economic collapse, or whatever we called it back in 2008, happened, many people lost homes, they lost jobs, they lost their savings, and the economic recovery has been very flat. And while the very wealthiest people continue to make money hand over fist, most ordinary people feel financially at risk all the time. That kind of economic instability and fear that most ordinary Americans are living with on a daily basis is exploited by our political class to manipulate their fears, especially with Donald Trump's attack on immigrants. That was very much an effort to incite fear create an us versus them rhetorical communication context where those who are feeling economically fragile can say, yeah, it's those immigrants. They're the reasons I can't make my rent this month because I can't get a better job. And that kind of anger and fear, I think the Trump campaign capitalized on in 2016 to help propel him into the White House. And he's continued to use that rhetoric over the last 4 years to continue to feed that base and reinforce those fears and resentments towards immigrants and people who are other.
Can I give just another example?
Yes, please.
It's very fast. So, of course, I think that the economic crisis explained a part of the situation of Brazil after 2013. But I don't think it's the most relevant variable to explain Jair Bolsonaro election. So, 2 examples. We have some opinion leaders from music, for example, like Lobão and Roger Moreira from Ultraja Rigor. It's a rock and roll band, Jenny here. And they became like opinion leaders. So every like TV shows was inviting them to talk about politics. And those 2 guys, they agree, and many other people in the music agreed that PT destroyed rock and roll, Brazilian rock and roll. And a lot of comedians said the same thing. Like the political correctness destroyed the humor, the comedy in Brazil. And so there are resentments based on economic situations, but cultural as well.
Yeah, I would just mention, I have just remember John Mearsheimer's recent argument that we have opened a large opportunity for nationalism against the individualism of neoliberalism and the hegemony of universalist liberalism since the end of the Cold War. This is a very interesting argument that has just appeared. Okay, we have more questions. Professor Stromer-Galley and Aggio, thank you very much for your lectures. Professor Stromer-Galley, could you please elaborate a little bit more on the relevance of Trump's lack of civility due to his target audience?
Yeah, right. It's a good question. I must confess, I haven't really thought so much about this, but I think maybe it goes a little bit back to Arthur's question about how this sort of advertising to pockets of the public can further polarize and also kind of lead to governing only to those pockets. I have many different thoughts at once. I feel that the Trump campaign's advertisements, when they are uncivil, are speaking to, again, these fears, as well as continuing the Trump construction of his authenticity as a person. So one of the things that Trump was noteworthy about when he was running in 2015 and 2016 was how authentic he was. You know, when you heard him speak, he didn't have flowery words. He wasn't a rhetorical genius like a Barack Obama. You know, he just said it like it was, straight talking, just a guy, a very wealthy, but nevertheless just a guy who says it like it is. And his attacks, his uncivil attacks on his opponents and journalists and other members of the media and women, those attacks are part of his authenticity. He just says it like it is. And so the advertisements then kind of continue, I think, this construction of him as basically saying what's on his mind, unfiltered, what you all are thinking, but you won't say, that he's willing to say because he's Donald Trump.
Okay, great. We have a 2-part question now. Professor Stromer-Galley from Marco Konapaki. And Professor Aggio, do you think regulate social media platforms is the way to strengthen democracy?
Professor Aggio? Oh, I see that. Sorry, the second part.
Sorry, yeah. Looks like only because Facebook became more transparent since 2018, Illuminating 2020 project was possible. Do you think we might rely on platforms to turn transparent, or should we rely on state enforced that?
Yeah, Professor Aggio, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I think yes, we have it's a good question, and it's a very complex problem, and I think we need to do something. I don't know if we can count on these enterprises to create more transparency and avoid like uncivil discourses or disinformation, the circulation of fake news. And maybe, sure, we do need to regulate, and the state should regulate. I don't know how, actually. And this is a discussion that, because I like the line between the need for regulation to preserve some important practices and principles of democracy, and the risk to I don't know, like attack, assault rights and liberties are very thin. And I don't know what is the middle dose, I mean, the right dose, I mean, like for that. But certainly the state regulation is in this discussion, and is needed. I don't know which one, but certainly we need it.
Oh my God, yes, we need regulation. I mean, yeah, the platforms on their own are never going to be the level of transparency and kind of accountability that we need in a democracy. It is only because of Cambridge Analytica and the controversy that surrounded Facebook after the 2016 election that Facebook said, okay, fine, we need to do more. And I'm always skeptical of the motives behind their efforts to make things more transparent, because they're still not very transparent. So I would love to be able to better understand who is actually being targeted in these advertisements on Facebook. But Facebook will not share the level of granularity needed to be able to determine where these advertisements are running. Giving a state level view, which is what they only provide to us now, doesn't help to see which pockets are really being activated in a given state. So for example, with Michigan, the state of Michigan turned out to be very important in 2016. Michigan and Wisconsin were two states that the Donald Trump campaign probably spent a lot of advertising revenue on, and probably spent a lot of time micro-targeting in those states at Republicans certain messages that we never will see, because Facebook also won't open up the ad library back to 2016. So we cannot go back and see what they've done, what the campaigns did in 2016. And again, they won't give the fine-grained analysis to allow us to really see who's being activated. There are all kinds of problems with the transparency that currently exists. So for example, Facebook, one of my doctoral students, Sarah Bolden, is working on an analysis of the deleted ads. So when campaigns run ads, some of them get pulled off those ads, to understand why they got pulled off. It's unclear. It's not clear what policies are being violated. There's some suggestion that they get pulled because an organization complains, not that they've actually violated any policy of Facebook's. The actual policies that Facebook has about what's acceptable and not acceptable on the platform constantly is changing, never is clearly documented in a single place. So there are so many issues, and that's just Facebook, right? We're not Google. Huge amounts of money are being spent on Google and the Google ad infrastructure. Google will provide reports of the dollars that are spent, but Google will not provide the ad content. So projects like mine, we can't help anybody to see what's actually being said in those advertisements. What kind of deceptive misinformation, manipulative information that is basically getting voters to vote against their own interests. We have no idea. The platforms will not regulate themselves. It is only going to be acts of Congress that will get these platforms to do so. And the United States Congress, going back to the problem, they cannot compromise on anything. We have a divided government, and most of our senators are 65 and older. They don't even, frankly, fully understand these platforms. And so it's a, and laws are always behind technology. So, but we are at a crisis right now in our democracy, and it is time for our government to do its job and increase the likely transparency that is needed so that we can have a functioning democracy. Our institutions are very weak right now, and the government is not helping. Sorry, very strong opinion. Apologies.
No, thank you very much. I'm completely pro regulation, and also I do think that it's better to correct bad regulation now than to do nothing. And actually, our institutions is in pretty bad situations either here. So, Victor Chagas, Professor Victor Chagas, pleasure to have a question from Professor Chagas here. One of the differences I see between media coverage on digital campaign in the US and in Brazil lies in the fact that campaign in the US seems to be focused on strategies assumed by the candidates. Micro-targeting as one of them, whereas in Brazil we have a more hostile environment to public sanctions, largely driven by an informal campaign environment based on dissemination of apocryphal content. This is the case, for instance, with the indiscriminate instrumental use of memes as negative campaign pieces and WhatsApp political discussion groups. Do you also see this difference?
That's a big question. Camilo, do you want to start?
I think you should, actually. I'd like to hear what you see about it in the U.S.
Yeah, well, so I will note that me and Patricia Rossini have a grant. We had a grant. We finished up. We're still doing the analysis, but we had a grant to study WhatsApp. The goal was to study WhatsApp in the Brazilian elections in 2018, specifically around these questions of misinformation and mimetic content that was flowing through WhatsApp, probably coming from the political parties or the candidates themselves as an effort to push misinformation into the political space through these WhatsApp groups, which are largely invisible to the public and to journalists because they're closed groups, they're private groups, they're small groups or even large groups, but nevertheless not public in the same kind of way as, say, Facebook or Twitter groups might be. And I can't. It's hard to compare some of this. The United States has a different social media information ecosystem. WhatsApp never really caught on in the same kind of way. Mimetic content, however, does flow in a number of forums. Reddit, 4chan, many of these, there's a right-wing group called Gab, which is trying to be a competitor to Twitter. So there are these different social media platforms that are targeting particular ideological groups and spreading memes through them. And again, it's a bit invisible to the journalism community because they're not necessarily there and seeing this unfold. And so it's not visible and not open to critique because we can't see it, and it's kind of happening in these echo chambers, and that's definitely a challenge. My sense is it's more of a challenge in Brazil because of the prevalence of WhatsApp and some of the it seems to be quite deeply problematic efforts at misinformation through mimetic content through WhatsApp. So I definitely see it's a problem for sure.
Yeah, Camilo.
Oh, you're muted.
Your mic.
I'm so sorry. I was about to have an invasion in my room, the two kids. And so I think Victor already answered the question, doing the question concerning Brazil. Yes, we do have this problem. I don't know exactly the difference between what happens in the U.S. and what happens in Brazil, but we do have this. Victor is a specialist, Professor Janeiro, on WhatsApp political communication in Minas. So what I think is that maybe the most problem about WhatsApp here, especially here in Brazil, is the lack of transparency. Just like to use what Professor Jennifer was talking about. And we do not know what happens there. I mean, like, even if you are like looking systematically to a lot of groups, we do not know the whole universe. We do not know for how much time some kind of or some kind of information, any kind of information is circulating in that platform. And that's a problem, because even we have some, so for example, we had a lot of hostile informations and then fake news about the Jair Bolsonaro opponent in 2018, Fernando Haddad from PT, a lot of things. So we do not know. We do know what kind of information, some kind of information that circulated, because some journalists, some fact-checking agencies showed us, but we cannot respond for how long that was circulated, and how many people it reached, with what effect. And I think that this lack of total lack of transparency do not contribute to the state to regulate discussion, the public discussion. So if somebody's lying about me on television, we can just ask the Supreme Court justice to have the right to answer that, to have the right to defend myself. What about WhatsApp? We do not know anything about it. So I mean, like this, for me, concerning this question, the most challenging thing is the lack of transparency to know how this works on this matter, of course.
I would like to share another quote from our interviews in our field work here concerning Bolsonaro's campaign. Campaign strategists told us that the situation in Brazil right now is that if you have a candidate and some fake news go viral 2 or 3 days before the election, you may lose the election without noticing what's going on. You don't even know what's going on after the election, in fact. So, wow, it's a very complicated moment. Do we have another question? Yes, Tatiana. Aggio and Stromer-Galley, thank you a lot. Which strategies, actions, content of political actors should be observed as a priority to understand the permanent campaign? Are ads also important in this situation, or does their impact focus on the election period?
Do you want to start, Jenny? It's about ads.
Yeah, so in terms of some of the features or characteristics of the permanent campaign, at least in the US context, some of it was the way that Donald Trump continued to hold basically campaign rallies while he was president. So he would travel and hold these big campaign events under the auspices of being president and talking to the public, but they were absolutely campaign events. The television advertising didn't really start until the 2019. So Trump began running ads. It's tricky, actually. So we have ads. Let me back up. We have collected all of the ads from the candidates that ran in 2020, including the primary candidates. So we have Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg, et cetera. We have all of those guys too. And they will show back up on the website once we finish the daily collecting that we're doing. So once election day happens, we will put back up the older content. We have ads for Donald Trump that go back to when the API is available to us, so 2018. So he was running Facebook ads back as far as 2018 on Facebook. Television, not so much, but yeah. And so it's an interesting question. And actually, I hadn't even thought about this until just now. So I have to thank you, because your question makes me think we need to go back and look at what those ads were saying and doing as far back as 2018. Why was he advertising, right? It's a really important question. So thank you. I hadn't thought about that until now. So thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Great. Camilo?
So I think that okay, I do not understand a lot about ads, so I think Professor Jennifer already answered the question dealing with that. Brilliant, and I think that in my opinion, actually, it's kind of a. I think the strategy, I mean, the main strategy, considering the fact that social media are creating a different kind, a new kind of permanent campaigning, is that you have to use it along. I don't know, you know, it's like unstoppable use of it. And see, we have this right-wing candidate of São Paulo right now, Guilherme Boulos. We do know that he's into a social movement, a pretty old social movement for housing policies and stuff like that. But the way he's been using all those pages, profiles on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and also WhatsApp groups, it's a good example of that. He's trying to create a public image, to create some good chances to be a strong candidate and a strong, political actor that is fighting for mandates, for votes. So I think that that's the most challenging thing concerning that. You cannot be out, okay? If you are out, you can be impeached. You know, as happened to Dilma Rousseff, for example. You know, and so that's the thing. I think it's less about which tools you're using, and it's much more about for how long you're using. And that's the thing. Creativity. It's another variable here.
Okay, great. It's important to notice that Bolsonaro's campaign was not some campaign marked by the use of ads. Don't you think, Camilo? Yeah, it was not the case. We are still to see a campaign, major campaign using ads as a main strategy, especially presidential campaigns, at least. But I do think we're gonna see this. I do think we're gonna see this in short time. So we have a last question. I just like to apologize for because we have a couple of more questions, but now we are reaching our time. So we have one last question coming from Tatiana Maria Dourado. Professor Stromer-Galley, what do you think of platforms banning online political ads and of Facebook's resistance to it? Do you see this as a solution to tackle disinformation campaigns in elections?
Yeah, it's a great question, Tatiana. The Facebook, for example, and they're not alone. A number of the platforms have said that any advertisements that run after Election Day that declare a winner of the presidential election or any of the House or Senate elections, if the election is unsettled, will not be allowed to run. So the platforms are removing advertisements or banning particular kinds of ads. In fact, so today, today's Tuesday. Today is the last day that the campaigns can run any new ads on Facebook. and Instagram. So they can continue. So if they made an ad buy, the ads will continue to run through election day. And I think they can even add more money to those ads to boost impressions. They just can't put any new content up. And that is meant to help, actually back, Arthur, to your observation of concerns about misinformation that might be spreading. This is one effort by the platforms to say, okay, at least in the paid advertising space, we will not allow for last minute, really problematic discourse to be paid and run through the platforms. Doesn't help with the unpaid stuff, but nevertheless, it helps with the paid stuff. Going back to my concern, I think the platforms need to basically create boundaries of what is and is not acceptable to be said in advertisements. We used to have expectations of truth in advertising, that when you ran an advertisement, that the statements, the claims that were made in those advertisements were true. And again, it is hard sometimes to say, well, is it true? Or, how do you judge? But we do really need to think about what's acceptable discourse, and how do we hold our politicians accountable to it? And the platforms play a very important role in that discussion, because they're going to increasingly be where the advertisements are running. So again, we do need some policy discussion about these issues for sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we have reached the end of this event. I would like to thank again very much our speakers, Professor Stromer-Galley. It was an honor. Professor Camilo Aggio, my friend and colleague. Always a pleasure to hear you. And thanks to the National Institute of Science and Technology for promoting this meeting. Please notice the program of our international conference during the whole week. Then thank you for coming again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.